Hi, welcome back to my channel. It's Avis Actually, and I'm back with another video. Alright, in this video, I want to discuss forgiving and forgiveness, forgiving others specifically. I know in life, each of us have possibly felt personally victimized by something that someone said, someone's actions, someone's demeanor, and I just want to have this video be an encouragement to someone out there who's dealing with or who's processing forgiving. First and foremost, I want to start off with a disclaimer. This disclaimer I did create and I wanted to write just for those of you out there who may be experiencing different types of emotional domestic hardship within your relationships. I want to make it explicitly clear that my statements in no way condone, dismiss, or minimize abuse in any form, shape, or severity. My intention is solely to discuss the personal choice of forgiveness as a tool for empowerment in situations that are not life-altering or inherently harmful. This perspective is about personal growth and emotional release and should never be interpreted as justification for or tolerance of abusive behavior. Okay, y'all, so with that disclaimer and housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into the video. As I mentioned already, many of us have been personal victims of some type of trigger, right? Whether it be childhood trauma, sibling rivalries, relationships with your parents, friendships, foes, even people that are strangers can affect us emotionally in a way to where we feel triggered. Today, I want to talk about 5 different points and how to process or at least start getting yourself prepared and ready in the journey to forgiving others. Okay, first, let's assess the situation, right? I feel like I'm a very forgiving person and maybe sometimes even overly forgiving. However, in my mind, I like to process what actually happened. Like, why was I offended? Why did that person say or do what they did say or did they do? Like, why did that even happen? What was the circumstance? To get down to the bottom of what is the fact versus truth versus feeling. Like, in the midst of all of that, things can sometimes get very gray. We can always say in our minds, like, okay, our parents made this decision. They should have been wiser. Or my sibling did this. They should have known better. Or you're my friend, you're my road dog. Like, how dare you? Sometimes we can allow our feelings to kind of create a gray area for fact and truth. And it can honestly keep us from forgiving others, especially when we're feeling like we're owed an apology or we're owed some type of retribution to what has happened to us and what has taken place. A lot of times, some people may feel like forgiving others is invalidating. It may seem like, okay, if I forgive them, then, is my truth no longer valid? And that's not the case. Forgiving others is really just to free up space, mental space, emotional space, grievances, and to really just let go so that you can move forward. When you're forgiving others, it's really important to know who you are, right? So we don't want to allow what happened to us to define us. We don't want those feelings of lack of forgiveness to define us either, right? So in order to move on, we really need to decipher, like, who am I, right? So my journey to me being my best self, I don't want to be someone who holds on to negative emotions. I don't want to hold on to the past. I've struggled with anxiety, depression, and just like there have been times where there's been a cloud over my head with me just thinking about the trauma that I've experienced. And sometimes in those moments, I can find myself feeling isolated or even just like wanting to really blame the other person of, how dare you? How could you? When the reality of it is, even without an apology, how am I defined and how do I define myself? And as someone who's on a journey to my best self, I don't want to be defined by the lack of forgiveness and or grudges that I may hold against other people. More importantly, I don't want to be defined by someone not giving me something that I feel like I deserve. I am so much more than an apology from someone. I am so much more than an acknowledgement from someone. And even though those things are very important in building rapport within relationships and just creating and building trust with others, I don't have to allow the lack thereof to define me. So pattern recognition can be what triggers us the most, right? So in our brains, we're feeling like, I've seen this before. So our brain is seeing the situation and is like, I've been here before. I remember how I felt. I also remember when someone else did this to me or when you did this to me. Sometimes, and a lot of times, for us to feel triggered and traumatized by a situation, and recognizing that pattern that we're going through, it doesn't always have to be the exact person who was the initial offender in the first place. While I'm identifying, who am I and am I allowing this to define me, I am also processing and being realistic. Have I seen this before? Have I seen this pattern before played out with this individual specifically, with this same thing? And that's when I really have to kind of take a step back. And I'm just like, okay, am I bringing old emotions of something that I've already forgiven someone for, or old emotions from a situation that had nothing to do with this into now this present situation? Again, a part of me wanting to be my best self and working towards my best self, I don't want to carry anything old into my present. Now, obviously, I'm a human being. It's going to happen. There's going to be things that come up that I am just living through life that are going to trigger me and remind me of certain experiences that I've had. It's also important for me to also be realistic with, am I carrying those emotions from that previous experience into this one? Whether it be the same person or not, have I allowed my emotions to take lead in this situation and define me, right? So if I'm on my journey to my best self, that means that I'm doing my best to show up as my best self every single day. I know me. I don't know about y'all. I do not like people to hold me to the person who I used to be, especially if I feel like within myself, I've experienced a lot of growth. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not she. And even though I can unpack her and become her again, I've been transformed. Like, I'm not that girl anymore. And so I try to offer that same type of grace to other people. Forgiving others is not easy. Letting go is not easy. However, if you practice some of these things, it can make it easier for the next time that somebody does something that does offend you. All right, that just brings me into my next point. And I know I'm probably gonna lose a couple of people here, but this forgiving others with intention, it's not easy. We're thinking about validation. We're thinking about, some people, how can I get even? How can I get even? How can I get with it, right? And we're not always thinking about, how can I forgive them first? How can I be intentional about offering them and extending them compassion? We're not always also thinking about how we can extend understanding. I know for me, I expect others to extend compassion and understanding. With me expecting that type of grace from others, I also really do my best to extend it. Sometimes when we're forgiving with intention, we have to be very understanding and compassionate with where that person is. For example, parents, I feel like, are the easiest topic to talk about. We all feel personally victimized by our parents in one way, shape, or form, at least once in our lives. Even in situations like that, we can offer some type of understanding and compassion, even if we don't agree. And that's what I really want to kind of point out here. Forgiving others doesn't always mean that we're going to agree with what happened, and it doesn't always mean that we're not going to be offended by what happened. Sometimes in forgiving others, we can extend compassion and grace, and knowing that where they were and who they were at that time, maybe they did the best they could. And maybe they also didn't. I also like to take ownership of my own feelings. That's very important for me. Being someone who struggles with anxiety, overthinking, depression from time to time, I really like to be in charge, and I really like to take the initiative in how I feel about others. Forgiving others is so important into me becoming my best self, and I really think that it could be very important to you also becoming your best self. Which brings me to my last point. Forgiving others can provide a lot of freedom from within. In my last point, I talked about extending compassion and understanding. And sometimes that means seeing people for who they are and meeting them where they are. A lot of times we have expectations from the internet, from books we read, from things that we see. We expect people to show up in our lives the way that everyone else says that they should. And sometimes, and a lot of times, people expect relationships without friction. I wanted to create this video for myself and for others just as a reminder that you can find a lot of freedom from within just by forgiving others. You have the power to move forward, and you have the power to set boundaries. I know a lot of times when we're talking about forgiving and forgiveness, a lot of people run to cutting people off as setting a boundary. Sometimes in offering and extending compassion and understanding, we kind of have to allow people to show up And then also knowing when to back off a little bit. The boundaries that you set are really put in place to protect you in the future and to let the other person know where you stand. Setting boundaries can set you up in your relationships to create a more realistic, also a more healthy and well-rounded relationship. We have to be realistic with ourselves of what we're feeling, why we're feeling it, and how we want that to be different. I really hope that this video resonated with some people and it was very helpful. And I hope that you can find it in your heart and in your life and in your choices to maybe find someone to forgive. If you like this video and you want to continue on with this Journey to My Best Self series, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you can be aware when I post more videos. Thank you for tuning into my video. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.